Hey everybody, I've been in here for a little bit. Love seeing everything in the comment, seeing everybody check in with where you're from. So hello to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. As Jason said, I'm so excited to be here. I was supposed to be there last year, and literally I was right here in this restaurant with my suitcase, getting ready to head out, and I got delay notifications coming in on my phone, and started to realize that flights weren't going to line up, and there's no way I was going to make it to Philly in time for or Delaware, I guess, where we were. I was flying into Philly, but then over to Delaware, where we were last year. There's no way I was going to make it in time for my Sunday morning session. So excited that I can do this right here from Pensacola. I've seen people checking in from all over the place. I love all the Florida folks, and I'm super impressed with you West Coast folks who are already awake, because I gotta be honest, I'm in Central Time, and it was a struggle for me to get up and ready for this in the morning. So the fact that you guys are there, I love it. David, what's up, buddy? From Polyscience, and Nate from Samick, how are you guys doing? Jen, thank you so much. Great to see you there. So I'm excited to have all of you here, especially a big thank you to Jason and Mike for creating this community, bringing all of this together. Paul, I see. So I'm going to tell you guys, I'm going to try to keep an eye on the comments and responding to you as I can. Where is Pensacola? I'm happy to say we are away from the hurricanes right now, but we are in the very tip of the panhandle in Florida. So actually about 25 minutes from the Florida state line. Excuse me. Well, the Florida-Alabama border. About 25 minutes. So way at the end of the panhandle, near the storms, but thankfully far away from them. So anyway, as I was saying, Mike and Jason, who have created this amazing community here of the International Sous Vide Association and created this conference, so excited to be a part of it, and so thankful for them and what they have created. Sous vide really has been a big part of my life for quite a long time. I've been into it for a while, and that was sort of where I wanted to start and just kind of give you guys a little bit of background, about me and sort of what my sous vide journey was. It actually, I guess, it started in 2006 when I first moved to New York City. Was working for Danielle Ballou at Restaurant Danielle, and when I first arrived there, they were already doing some sous vide cooking back in 2006. So it's really kind of crazy to think where we are just in the span of 15 years, where this was the thing that I'd never heard of, and this was one of a couple of restaurants in New York City that was using it to where we are now. That everyone, most people have multiple units now, in their own homes is pretty amazing. Certainly at that time, it was just unbelievably cost prohibitive and difficult to do, to cook sous vide and be set up for sous vide cooking. But so that was my introduction. I was absolutely fascinated by immediately the process of sous vide, the results that were possible, and just starting to learn about the technique. But really didn't get a chance to take off with sous vide and truly experiment with, because there's not really, when we were cooking with it at Danielle, it was a focus thing. It was okay. It was, for the foie gras terrine. It was for, a veal terrine, whatever, we may be doing. There wasn't a lot of time and opportunity for experimentation. When I moved over to ICE, the Institute of Culinary Education in Manhattan, we had a unit there. Fellow chef Chris Giswaldi had one, and we started experimenting, all the time with that. And that was where, so that was 2009 at that point. Started getting really, into it and kind of understanding what incredible capabilities we had. 2 years later, I got this amazing opportunity to actually go to Italy and study sous vide in Italy, small town just north of Venice, Musile di Piave. There's a company called Orved there who I partnered with and went for 5 days and trained in their facilities in Italy, which was just an incredible experience. Gained so much knowledge at that point. So after that, in 2011, I actually came back and started teaching sous vide at ICE. I think, as far as I know, we were one of the first culinary schools to have a dedicated, sous vide program, or even, sous vide courses dedicated straight to that, not just like, oh, hey, we're going to do a little sous vide technique here. Because that was about the same time Dave over at FCI was doing lots of cool stuff as well. But anyway, so point of all of that is I've been teaching sous vide to professional chefs and to home cooks for unbelievably now like 7-8 years. So I've had a lot of them. Joseph Bruno, I've seen you there. Yes, you have enjoyed them. I appreciate you. So we have a lot of, obviously just a lot of experience and for me, I think it's an incredible technique. And the way I like to talk to people, about sous vide, and obviously I'm kind of in the heart of the biggest sous vide fans right here, is that it is an incredible technique, and it's one to learn and one to experience. And, it's an essential tool to have in your arsenal. And that's, what I taught our cooks, when you learn to grill, you didn't cook every single thing on the grill. You mastered it. You find the things that you liked best grilled, and you utilize it that way. And I think it's, the same with sous vide. But really, our focus today is about culinary creativity, where science and technique meet. And I think that's kind of the heart of what I want to talk to you about, and hopefully inspire you guys a little bit to continue to learn and explore more. So, for me, another part of my background, besides teaching at ICE and my experience with sous vide and all of that, and now this restaurant that is behind me, Angelina's, I've also do things with the Food Network. That journey started quite a few years ago as well, when I became the first 2-time champion on Chopped. I was the won an episode in season 1, and then I came back and actually won the first champions tournament at the end of season 2. So that was an incredible experience for me. Was, of course, great exposure and a whole lot of fun. But it, a lot of people would always ask me about, like, oh my gosh, how do you do that? How do you come up with the dish? Where does it come from? I know you have a lot of time to plan. First of all, no, there's no time to plan. Everything you see on the TV is from the time the basket's open to the time the plates are finished is all in real time. There are no cuts. There's no TV timeouts. It's one straight live shot that, of course, they edit down. But from the second the basket's open to the time you get on the plates, we're on one straight running clock. So there is no time to plan. There's no time to come up. So you're really relying on your instincts about, putting together ingredients, putting together flavors. And that was something that I always sort of enjoyed. I think I have kind of a science and math geared mind. And so, to me, everything is a little bit like a puzzle, and you were finding those pieces and, figuring out how to put them together. And it just made sense to me. So, but, so much people, will often ask me that question, how do you do this? How do you do this? How do you get that? And it's so important, I think, kind of, understanding the background and where do, how do these ingredients fit together? Where do the flavors in these ingredients come from? How are the techniques that we're going to apply going to, manipulate flavor, texture, and the end result all the way around. And that's what I want to focus on today. And I like to kind of I think a good analogy to this idea of understanding science and technique and where they meet is I'm motioning across the street because when you're opening a restaurant, it's actually a fantastic thing to live across the street from it. So right here in downtown Pensacola, I'm sitting in the restaurant and my kids are across the street, and my wife is there too. But anyway, half of my world, the other half that's not the restaurant, is building Legos with my son. And to me, that's kind of a great analogy to cooking, and understanding science and technique. And basically, when you learn and sort of understand so much of creativity gets kind of mired down in previous experience. And I think that's, one of those things where, I did this recipe that put these two ingredients together and it was great. And so now, your brain draws that connection between those two ingredients. And as you cook more, as you become more experienced, as you become a more experienced chef, as you become a more experienced diner, you learn more of those combinations. But, again, we get mired down into just the previous experience. What have I had before that tasted good together? And then how can I adapt that to, what I want to do now? And that's where a lot of creativity comes from, is where a lot of it starts from. But, to me, it's like building a Lego set, right? You go out, you buy the set, you build the exact thing, so you replicate a recipe, you build the exact thing that the Lego box has the instructions for. And it's an incredible creation, and that's great. All right. And then you see, oh, wow, I see these pieces, it'd be fun, which is exactly what my son does. I build them for him, and then he just rips them apart. And then he builds his own little thing. So he sees the blocks and he finds a different way to put them together. And that's sort of where, I think, mostly where most of us get trapped. It's like, okay, we got the set, we put it together, take the set apart, we put it back together our own way, which is really cool. But then when you really start to understand and master the science and the techniques that you're working with, that you're cooking with. I mean, I think to me, it's like getting equipped with a 3D printer. So now you're actually creating your own Lego blocks and building your own creations from, not requiring, pre-existing pieces. And so that's what I want to, talk to you guys a little bit about, and hopefully, as I said, inspire you to dig deeper and get into that process. So, for me, that journey, which a lot of you may know, began, or the journey ended right here with my book, the last book that came out, The Flavor Matrix, which is all about the science of ingredient pairing, what ingredients go well together. And it's about, this book is about, where does flavor come from? Where does it all start? Jen, you use it all the time. Thank you. Sorry, I'm a little distracted too. I'm a little starstruck just seeing Simon over there. So, hey, Simon, thrilled to have you in here and listening as well. We were actually just laughing at Scott Conant together with his George Michael look, as Simon called it the other day on Instagram. So, anyway, happy to have you here. But the science of flavor. Where does flavor come from? How do we understand it? How does it, how do we get to know it? And for me, this was an incredible journey that began with working with IBM. So for any of you, probably the majority of you don't know the backstory, the Chef Watson project began at the Institute of Culinary Education 6-7 years ago. They came to us with this idea and told us that they had this concept where a computer was going to help me as a cook be more creative. Then I laughed at that. I was like, yeah, right. How could a computer without a nose, without a tongue, possibly know more about cooking than me, who's been, a chef at this point for 15 years? So he said, basically I was like, yeah, I'll cook against the computer and I'll kick the computer's butt and that'll be the end of this. The first day I was in the kitchen cooking with Watson, I was absolutely blown away. Because what it did was reveal to me this science of food and the science of flavor. And, like all of you probably, I had that Rolodex in my mind of, hey, everywhere I've worked, we put these ingredients together, and you have that list. I think a lot like, of course, another fantastic book, The Flavor Bible, which, list out from chefs, hey, we're starting with the lemons. These are all the ingredients, that we like to put with lemon. And again, you build that Rolodex, but that's all based off previous experience. What we were able to do with Watson was not only, see the ingredients that pair well together, but understand the why, which is so essential. Whether, you're talking about putting flavors together or you're talking about, cooking and, mastering your sous vide technique, understanding the why, what happens, and how. For 3-4 years, we worked with Watson, understanding the actual chemical compounds. Oftentimes talking about hundreds of different chemical compounds that create the flavor of a simple strawberry. When we look at a strawberry, there's 405 different aromatic compounds that create the flavor of that one strawberry. And I like to liken those to the pixels in a photograph. If you take that snapshot of the flavor of that strawberry, you've got 405 different shades of pixels that create the actual flavor of that strawberry. If you take away just one of those colors, you can change it dramatically. And I see Stefan. So I'll get to Stefan's question in just a moment. You can change it dramatically. So and it's things that you wouldn't even realize often. So when you're looking at the compounds in a strawberry, one of the most prominent compounds is one called mesofurane. Mesofurane actually has the aroma of fresh baked bread, almost like a buttery croissant. That's not something when you take a bite of a strawberry you're ever really going to detect on your own, with your own nose to understand that, hey, that flavor is present here in this ingredient. But when we look at the science of it, when we look at the breakdown and say this is playing a huge role in the flavor of the strawberry, things start to click. You're like, wait, strawberry, just a simple buttered toast with strawberry jam. Why is that such? Why does that taste so good? There's these things happening behind the scenes that lead us to that. And that's the mesofurane compound there. You take away that compound, and it's going to be dramatically. It's going to be a dramatically different flavor. So to Stefan's question, is it similar to the flavor thesaurus? I think what we do in the flavor matrix is actually break down the full science of an ingredient. So rather than just giving you a list of ingredients that pair well with another ingredient, we're going to break down the aromatic compounds that create the flavor in that ingredient, the aroma categories that they occupy, and then what ingredients share a high percentage of those aroma compounds. So it's the flavor pairing theory. Basically, that started with Heston Blumenthal kicked off in about 1999 when they discovered their caviar and white chocolate pairing, and they started to delve into the science. Why these ingredients taste so good together? They wanted to understand it better, and it's led us to this huge understanding. So we've broken down all the ingredients across categories, about 58 different ingredient categories. Did an actual data analysis of shared compounds between these ingredients. So when you look at a pairing chart, and these are based on kind of the tasting wheels that you would see for wine tasting, beer tasting, coffee, all of it. So around those aroma categories, but each bar that represents a pairing with a specific ingredient is also a set data point that tells you the percentage of compounds that those two ingredients have in common. So that's really, really, kind of digging in deep with flavor and getting to understand where it comes from. And the whole idea of this is, again, to empower you guys as the readers, as the cooks, as the chefs, with better understanding, better knowledge, so that you can be more creative. And so we look at that from a flavor standpoint, through things like the flavor matrix and the creation. And then we actually have a new book coming out this fall called Flavor for All, which is taking all the principles of the flavor matrix and applying them down into into everyday recipes. So where this is always going to be your reference tool, the Flavor for All is a book you can just cook from for fun. But so that's the first half of it is just understanding flavor, understanding ingredients, and I think you guys a lot of you already know the power and the capability of sous vide. And what that means for flavor and how we can both create, intensify, and combine flavors with our sous vide technique, right? Aroma and flavor go hand in hand, right? And that is Diane. Thank you so much pre-ordering Flavor for All. Appreciate that. aroma and flavor go hand in hand, is exactly what Darren said. And he, as the barbecue guy, knows that more than any. The flavor that's created from smoking, and we talk about actually creating flavor. There's very few times you can actually create flavor. Usually you're just dealing with existing flavors, how you put them together and how you join them. But smoking, the cooking process is your one opportunity to actually create flavor. And that's actually the distinction, and that's something we get into in the book. And I think this does kind of tie into our science and technique conversation. There's a distinction between taste and flavor. Really, there are only 6 tastes: salty, sweet, sour, bitter, umami, and fat. Those are the 6 things that are actually detected by your tongue. Everything else that you sense in food is coming through your nose. Of course, there's the exception, spicy is detected by the tongue, but it's not actually a taste bud. So there's a little gray area whether, spicy is a taste or not. But otherwise, you're dealing with things that are detected by the tongue and related directly to your brain. Everything else is coming up through the nose and being relayed to the brain. So all flavors are based on aromas, right? Which is why, those aromas are so important. And for me, one of the greatest things about sous vide cooking, because you can have an incredible amount of aroma loss during the cooking process in an open environment, right? Or in the case of smoking, you're actually adding those aromas into the food during the cooking process. But when you're putting together flavors and sealing them into a bag, they stay trapped, and you're not going to lose any of them. So it's an essential part of this technique. And how we can infuse, just like we just kind of heard about Jason's book about infusions, kind of creating that environment to get those flavors together and not giving them a place to escape, or be lost in the environment. Because when we talk about flavors, when we talk about these aromatic compounds, the scientific name for them are volatile compounds. They're literally volatile. They're going to break apart and be released into the environment. So the more control we can keep over those, keeping them sealed in a bag, the more flavor we're going to have in our food. All right. So that's part 1 of our technique: understanding flavors and driving our creativity. What ingredients go well together? How can we, take what we already know and expand it and expand upon it? So I, love that challenge to start. Right. And, using something like the flavor matrix as a great inspiration point for that. But then we go to the technique. And actually, I'm very excited. I've got a new Samick vacuum sealer on the way to me soon, and we're starting to experiment. When we talk about technique, what can be done? One of the things I love about sous vide is sort of your imagination is the limit, and we've got an incredible new concept for better or worse, one of our most popular dishes here at Angelena's chicken parmesan. It's a great dish, I know, classic, but I want it to be something special. I want it to be something unique. So we're working on a really incredible sous vide concept. Yes, Nate. Yes, Nate and Samick, thank you. We're working on a really incredible sous vide concept for chicken parmesan, right? And that's where the technique piece now comes in. You start to think about, your abilities, the forms, different textures, different shapes that you can create, once you master your technique. And that's kind of, the next phase here. Obviously, when I talk about sous vide, when I teach it, we basically look at, you have, 2 approaches to cooking. You're either, cooking, you typically with your lean cuts, you're cooking to temperature. So if I'm cooking a steak, if I'm cooking a chicken breast, I want to take it till it's just done. Whatever. I'm gonna be sharing this too. I see Joshua over there. So I'm gonna be once we master this sous vide chicken parm, I'm gonna be sharing it with you guys for sure. Maybe I'll get with Jason and Mike and see how we can get it out to the whole International Sous Vide Association community, because I'm pretty excited about it. In my mind, it's absolutely perfect. Probably in practice, as you guys know, it's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take a little bit of practice to get it all going just right. And I think that's, one of the secrets. I think that's an important point, for you guys to know as you scroll people's Instagram feed and you scroll, their blogs and look at these recipes, they're showing you and myself included, I'm showing you the best version of whatever it is I was making. What you're not seeing is the 6 to 8 failed versions that led me up to that. And that's such an important part of the creative process, are those failures and learning from them, each step of the way. I have to assume that you guys with your own sous vide cooking had plenty of those failures along the way. And they're a great part of the learning process. They're nothing to be, ashamed of. They're nothing to be upset about. If you make the same mistake this is the same thing I tell my cooks. You make the same mistake 2, 3, 4 times, then that's something to be upset about. But along the way, in everything that you're doing, there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be failures all the way along, and they only make you better. So embrace those opportunities, take those chances to learn from those mistakes. The chicken breast that comes out way too dry, the chicken breast that comes out way too dry, understand why it happened. Why was it too dry? Was the temp too high? Was the cook time too long? Whatever it may be, and then start to correct. I think it's great to start with. It's great to start with existing recipes. Excuse me, and get yourself a baseline. I always, tell everyone, with a new recipe, I'm going to cook it exactly as it's written the first time, evaluate the result, and then go back and start making my own changes to adapt it to exactly what I want. And, that's something I've talked about in all of my books. For me, when I put down a recipe, recipes to me are sort of alive, and they're always a living document. I look back at a recipe that I wrote 2 years ago, and I already want to change it. I want to do things differently. I've learned something. I have a different preference now, whatever it may be. So I think recipes are always great starting points, but they're not Bible. They're not end all be all. They're always open for interpretation and adaptation, and that's such an important part. And that takes us back again to understanding the science and the technique behind what it is we do. So I got a little bit off track there as we started kind of talking about those failures. But when you're cooking sous vide, you're either looking for a specific result, a specific temperature, and that's in your chicken breast, in your steak, in those items. Typically your lean protein items, and then otherwise you're looking for a specific result of texture, and that's typically in your high connective tissue items, high fat items that have that are going to tend to be tough when they're cooked normally. And we want to create that tenderness, and we want to start that process of breaking down connective tissue, rendering fat, whatever the process may be. And I think it's an important thing to start to learn. At what temperature does connective tissue begin to break down? About around 58 Celsius. And I always forget my. If somebody wants to jump in with the Fahrenheit conversion on that. But that's around, and actually, we were having this conversation the other day, can be as low as 54 Celsius, but where you start to get good concentrated, connective tissue breakdown, where you've got the elastin and the collagen starting to separate and turn into gelatin to create those, unctuous and creating some of that umami and those unctuous flavors and that richness that are typical of braised meats. You're looking at, thank you, Stefan, 137. You're looking around that temperature to begin that breakdown process, and that's I think a great starting point. You say, okay, that's about as low as I want to go if I'm trying to develop a new recipe with a really tough cut of meat. And obviously, as the temperature increases, the time decreases, and also the result. And the longer your proteins stay hot, the tighter they become, the more water loss they're going to have, and how all of this sort of the dance that's happening inside of the item that you're cooking. Let's see, Stefan's jumping in here, right? So 55, beginning at 55. Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with him. I think you can get it as low as 54, but right in that range Stefan is talking about. But as you go down to those temperatures, exactly right, you're taking a really long time. So that again, understanding this key piece of technique right here of where connective tissue breaks down. It leads you to, at 131, you're still cooking a steak medium, right? Or almost, kind of on that shoulder area of medium rare to medium is going to be the end result, but you can start to eliminate some of the connective tissue from it. So it can be a transformative temperature, but you have to understand it and understand what your timing takes. And if you want to start to increase your temperature a little bit, losing a little bit of that color, or possibly a little bit of the juiciness of the meat, and of course we're talking about small amounts here because we are cooking sous vide, where you have so much of that liquid retention. You can start to manipulate and adapt, and that's where you begin to feed your own creativity. So it really, I feel like brings us kind of around full circle now, talking about science, technique, where these items meet. And, I think that's the most important part of the process, and probably what I want to, leave you guys with before we start to open it up for all of your questions here, that I'm excited to get to. And getting a note here too for great breakdown of both time and temperature. Jason's talk shows a lot of, and he's got a lot of great visuals with that. So definitely a great resource right here, from the summit. So, probably the last piece that I want to leave you guys with as we get ready to open it up here to all of your questions and just conversation, that I'm excited to hear from you guys, is going to be about, being that active, being active in the cooking process and being engaged. And every time you step into the kitchen, every recipe that you undertake is an opportunity to learn, an opportunity for you to get better. So to be that active participant as you cook, to not just, oh damn, I got to get dinner made, but okay, what are we doing in this process, and being thoughtful of the steps. And I think that mindfulness in the cooking process, and as you gain more experience understanding how are we going to build, how are we going to create flavors, how are we going to create texture, how are we going to manipulate taste as we cook? Are we looking to sear an item before it goes into cook? And then how does that change the flavor of the steak if I sear the steak before I cook it sous vide, as well as after, or if I just sear it after? These evaluative processes, I think, are super, super important. When dinner's on the table, other than just enjoying the experience, to have that moment of evaluation and see what you can learn from the process that you just went through. And that's what I want to challenge you guys to do, and always encourage you to sort of think about the steps. And it's something I'm always pushing my cooks to do, to slow down, slow down and think about, hey, you're doing that right now. You're cutting the onions this size, but why are we cutting them that way? What's the purpose, and what result is that going to lead us to? So with that, I do want to open it up to questions for you guys. I see Darren over here in the side asking, do you think enthusiasts make the best chefs? And I do. And I think, it's something I saw throughout my career as an instructor at culinary school, and just throughout my career as a chef, in restaurant. I don't think you can be a chef if you're not also an enthusiast. If my mind is constantly, as I'm whatever I may be out doing, my mind is always kind of on, how do I challenge myself? How do I improve? What's the next thing, that I want to do? We talked about how these things that you see, these dishes you see on Instagram or, on someone's blog, you're only seeing the best version of it. And it went through those, sometimes dozens of trials before they landed on that photo that gets shared with you. But for me, I know for a lot of other people, not only did we go through those numbers of trials, that you went through days, sometimes months of that dish, that combination, just sort of living in the back of your brain and being processed and rolled over. And I have 6 to 8 dishes rolling around in my head at all times. that sometimes take me months to really finally work out, right, until just the right ingredient comes along from one of my local farmers, till just the right sort of reminder of a technique shows up, or comes up to me, that we really start to make the connections and put it all together. So if you're not an enthusiast, if you're not completely obsessed with it, if your brain's not constantly pushing and focused on your craft, then no, I don't think you can be a good chef. So absolutely, enthusiasts make the best. Going through here, grain fed, yeah. Stefan with some great advice there, talking about grain fed U.S. flank steak could be more tender without sous vide, but grass fed makes a huge distinction. And I've been getting more and more into grass fed beef lately, and it's a big challenge cooking grass fed beef, because it is so much leaner and actually has a different type of fat in it. We actually discuss it a little bit in the flavor matrix and get into it more in Flavor for All about how what a cow is fed affects not only affects the flavor by what types of fats are created in the meat. And the grain fed is going to create the most fat, but also, the softest fat when we look at the actual structure of that fat, linoleic versus linoleic and all that. But it's a great point, and so and I think that's one of the great things, and why you have to be an enthusiast, and why you have to be really obsessed with what you're doing, and you can master cooking steak sous vide, but then that's one type of steak, and then you start to look at different types of beef, and they present their own unique challenges throughout.
We have a question.
I'll get to Jen's question next because it's an easy one. Do I wash my own dishes anymore like we did in school? I feel like I wash more dishes now in a restaurant than I ever did as a culinary instructor, unfortunately, Jen. I had like a dozen of you guys that I could make go back and wash dishes. Now I've got, sometimes one dishwasher, and if he calls out, guess who's picking up the slack? It's me. So yes, sadly, I seem to be moving in reverse and washing even more dishes than I used to. Paul, above that, my signature sous vide dish. That's a tough one. I do love, I think, oh my God, I can't even remember. Jason or Mike, did we do the venison? Did we do the venison in the Champions of Sous Vide cookbook?
I believe so, Chef. Yes.
Yeah. So I'd say, for me, it's a toss up between the venison that's in Champions of Sous Vide, and the thing I love about that is that it is every element of that is made sous vide, and it incorporates so many different techniques, from cooking a venison rack sous vide to doing a sous vide infusion of mushrooms before finishing them on the grill, to doing a cold sous vide infusion of pears. Pickling squash sous vide and making a squash puree sous vide. We're layering in so many different techniques and applications of sous vide, all into one dish. That's one that I absolutely love. But then the other one is actually just is much more simple, and it's a duo of beef. And I really love to kind of both approaches to cooking beef sous vide. So we do a 48-hour short rib, along with a roast piece of either beef tenderloin or ribeye. So we tie up a whole roast, sear it on the outside, seal that, cook that sous vide for, depending on the size of the roast, 1 to 2 hours at 54 Celsius. And then we, of course, do our short ribs seared with a little bit of reduced red wine, sealed in the bag with it. Those go 48 hours at 58 Celsius. So you get kind of that tender braised short rib that's still basically medium on the inside, and you get that perfect roast, of the beef. Serving those two together with whatever seasonal sides we have at the time. One of my favorites. So toss up between those two. To really love them both as far as sous vide.
We have a good question from John Schaefer. He says, the most important question I have is, what is the large red object on the counter behind you?
The great question. So here, we'll go on a walk together, give you a better shot of it. That's our prosciutto slicer. So we keep that right out here. I'll give you guys a little tour of the restaurant too. How about this? So we're out here at the pizza oven right now. And this is the full bar setup. But that's our prosciutto slicer. You can see wine display behind me, and then we'll whip it around. There's the whole restaurant right there. Nice and quiet today. I've got it all to myself. But I figured we'd be much quieter here than with kids running around chucking Legos at my head.
I like that.
Very, very expensive machine. It's a beauty though. That's why we've got it on display, out here for everyone to see. Thank you all. Thank you.
We have Brian Oygarden says we still have time for a few more questions. I won't cut you off yet, Chef. Some people are behaving and
for the compliments.
Yeah, everyone's been doing the asking and the questions. You do such a good moderating yourself that I wanted to reward the people that use the ask a question button like they were instructed. So Brian Oygarden says, I've seen a lot of flavor pairing being based on matching flavor compounds in the ingredients. Is there any science on pairing based on contrasting flavors like sweet and salty?
Yeah. So, with that there, and that's actually something we do get into in the flavor matrix a little bit. So, Brian, talking about taste and, opposing tastes. Let's see if I can find it here for you. We talk about opposing tastes and opposing flavors. So, like right there, we do the how to pair taste, and the white and red lines are complementary versus opposing, or I say balancing to kind of put it more positive spin on it, because sweet and bitter, sweet and sour, sour and fat. Those are all excuse me. Opposing taste, but then we do break it down all the way across all of the categories of flavor to show what are good pairings, and sometimes they're complementary and sometimes they are opposing. They are opposing like that. So I think there's a good bit of that. There's a good bit of that in the flavor matrix. I don't unfortunately know any other. I hate to only be plugging that, but I don't know any other resources off the top of my head, for that information.
Tiago Cure, who did the spicy Moscow Mule demo for us at the cocktail hour, which was fantastic. He asked, how important is social media and TV appearances for a chef?
It more and more so. And I think, just as a way again to kind of communicate with the audience, to entice people in, we see a lot of benefit from social media in particular, just locally. I know that if I put up a photo of a specific pizza or a specific pasta, I can see that day an increase in the sales in that particular item. So it's, I think, just such a great tool for, communicating with people, for getting the word out, for reaching the audience. I think is really, really important. And then, TV is kind of the cherry on top, being able to do those things. So I do meet customers, who come in here and say, hey, we saw you on Beat Bobby Flay the other day. We saw, this, whatever it is. We knew we had to get in here and try it, the restaurant. So, it is, TV is great, but I think, it's much more, tangible to, have that social media to build that local audience, because that's so important. Those are the people who are coming into the restaurant, every day. And, it's a way for them to kind of get to know, I'm typically hidden away back in the kitchen. So it's a way for them to get to know and interact, a little bit, and, encourage, give them, I think, often I love when people have, whether, the courage or just want to say, hey, is James here? Can he come out and say hello? love that. And when they feel like they kind of know you a little bit through a social media profile, they're more prone to do that, and it makes it more of a unique and a special experience here at the restaurant.
Sheldon Penner, I know he's been doing a lot of catering lately. He wants to know, you talk about doing multiple recipes during an evening or a service. How does cooking change if you're cooking the same dish for a really large crowd, especially with catering?
Uh, it's tough. You do have to change your approaches, and that's why we kind of have actually a few different menus set here at the restaurant. Like we have our pasta tasting menu, which are a little bit more intricate, a little more involved, handmade pastas that we could never do for a large crowd. We couldn't even put them on the regular menu where we might be looking at selling 30 to 40 of them a night. The pasta tasting menu is usually we're selling about a dozen or so, sometimes 20 a night. But if you're thinking about a handmade farfalle, which is on our menu right now, that takes me 5 minutes to make 2 orders of it, and then if I've got to make 40 of those every day, just the timing of it doesn't work out. But catering and doing large events like that, really, really challenging. And when I was at Restaurant Danielle, I was a sous chef in the private dining room. So we were basically doing only large scale events, and sometimes they were as small as a dozen people, but sometimes they were as big as 80. And our menu there was the same as the main dining menu at Danielle, but we can't do that. You can't do the level of intricate garnishes that were on the main menu. So we'd always be looking at sort of paring it down. How do we make that dish still beautiful and enticing and really exciting, but make it manageable for 80 people serving it all at once, when often there were sometimes just 2 or 3 of us there to do a banquet for 50 to 60 people, which is kind of wild. So yeah, there's definitely a bit of adaptation when you're looking at scaling out dishes like that. But sous vide, what an incredible tool to really equip you for that. And a lot of times cooking in large quantity, getting things getting a consistent result and getting things evenly cooked can be really, really challenging. But it's almost, to me, it actually truly is, if you get down into it, it's exactly what sous vide was invented for, was for quantity cooking.
We have a few more. If anyone out there has more, feel free to drop them in the Ask a Question. While we have such a knowledgeable and generous chef, we want to make sure to pick his brain, so drop them in there. Steve Walker wants to know, can you speak to the benefits of chilling the meat post sous vide?
Sure. And also, hey, Rich, good to see you, man. Thank you very much. Great. I enjoyed listening to you yesterday as well. So benefits to chilling the meat after cooking sous vide. I'd be interested to hear what others think about that. I don't know, Jason, if you have any thoughts on that as well. I think if you go back to just basically what's happening during the cooking process, you can kind of think about it like muscle proteins going from this to this, and so the more they tighten, the tighter they squeeze, the wider sort of the protein matrix becomes, right? And it opens up and it allows for more moisture loss. When we're cooking sous vide, they're not going to tighten as much, so that mesh stays a little bit more close, returns or holds more of the liquid inside. Letting it cool all the way, it's I think we kind of use this term for the meat to reabsorb the juices. It's a good way to think about it. It's not actually true or really quite accurate to what's actually happening. The meat is not like a sponge where it can absorb juices. Proteins can relax and help hold more moisture, or help hold more liquid into the protein matrix, but it's not actually technically absorbing it the way we think about like a paper towel would absorb a spill. So by keeping it in the bag, and even just whether it be a 15-minute room temperature rest, or or a full-on chill. I don't know really actually the difference between. It's a great question. I don't know the difference between what benefit there might be between a 15 to 30 minute room temp rest after cooking versus a full chill before cooking.
I know Crea teaches when I went to their 3-day class, which as one of our sponsors, if anyone is interested in diving into a lot more of the sous vide science, check out Crea's in-person classes when those start back up. They are amazing. They definitely teach that there's more flavor retained if you let it chill afterwards. They let it sit at room temperature, and then tap water, and then an ice bath, and then you reheat it when you're at service. But like a lot of things, I would say it depends what you're trying to accomplish. And if you're Chef Briscione, and you're trying to maximize consistency in your restaurant and maximize flavor for people paying, for your amazing food, then it's probably more important than if I'm serving it to my wife after she's been working a 10-hour day and she just wants the food on the table and is much less concerned about that, 1% bump in flavor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think and that is a good point, and that may be a great takeaway for people. A lot of recipes may recommend going straight from the water bath to the ice bath. That's a pretty extreme temperature change and a pretty hard shock. And so I think you said Korea, they say go to a room temp water bath first, and then into the ice bath for the full chill. I mean, basically within you want to get it all the way down within 2 hours post cook. But going directly into the ice bath sometimes can be, especially if you're doing something a little bit more delicate, can be a really hard shock to that meat. And then also, if you think about, again, now we're back into technique and science, what's happening as the meat cools, you're getting an uneven, you're going to get an uneven chilling because it's going to be blasting that cold from the ice bath to the outside. And slowly penetrating the cool. It's going to be slowly penetrating the meat, where as if you can kind of bring down that core temperature in the room temp rest first, you'll get more even cooling and probably a little bit, I would guess, a little bit more liquid or water retention in the meat in a good way.
I think it came about from one of their the typical crazy AJ Gerard stories that when Thomas Keller or Daniel Villard were in there, they were like, oh, we should test this out, and they did it 30 different ways and did a taste test with some of the best chefs in the world, and they picked the 3-stage or whatever method. I will say, even if you're cooking at home, one of the things about at least chilling it lightly or letting it sit out a little bit is it can give you a longer sear. That if you don't have a super, super hot surface, if you bring down the outside temperature a little bit of the meat, you can sear it a little bit longer without overcooking it, which is good if you're struggling to smoke out your New York apartment. Smoke alarms, it can help with that.
Oh, I remember those days. I do not miss the New York apartment trying to sear something days.
Meathead would like to know tips on using the purge.
So, I saw there's, I think Father Leo actually did that session, right?
Correct.
Or is it coming up?
I forget when. I think it was yesterday. Yes, he did that.
Yesterday. All right. So, I would say go to that because that's not actually something I have a ton of experience with. I'll sometimes use a little bit, but I've got to be honest, I don't use it that much. So I'm excited to go back and listen to what Father Leo had to say about it and see what he can teach me.
It was pretty shocking. In the presentation I did, it was mentioned in the comments, but I took a chuck roast and I cooked it at 130 for 2, 6, 12, 24, and 48 hours and measured the juice that came out. And it was about 20% of the meat was lost after 24 to 48 hours. And then I did it with the temperatures at 130, 140, 150, 60, 170. And at 170, you're losing 38% of the weight of the meat coming out after just 18 hours.
Yeah,
that's definitely. Yeah. If you can use it, it's definitely worth doing it. But it's also in a restaurant, you probably have a lot more than we do at home.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I saw Simon asking about classic dishes from my background you think can benefit from sous vide compared to traditional methods. We've played around a little bit with it, Simon, and everybody here, of course. Uh, One thing that I've actually had a good bit of success with that I have really liked is actually building some ragouts sous vide. And more of the kind of the traditional style ragu, where I'll take chunks of pork shoulder, sear them, take them out of the pan, throw in a little bit of mirepoix, deglaze it with wine, add a bit of tomato, bring that all up to a simmer, and then get all of that in a bag, and let that go. I've done 24-hour ragu. So you're basically kind of taking your typical pork stew or a pork shoulder, sort of braise or slow cook, but including the tomato and the aromatics and all of that within the cook, and utilizing that and then taking that out and finishing that with pasta. And I've been really happy with the results for that. The way we go through it at the restaurant, it's not always it doesn't always work out. It's much more sense for us to throw 6 shoulders in a giant pan and make that quantity at once. But ragouts have been something we've definitely explored, and then of course applying to a lot of the traditional braises like a cacciatore. We've done with great results, and I think that can be a lot of fun and something we play around with sometimes for special dinners that we're going to do. To kind of take what are some of those classic dishes and elevate them in a way, and try to present them in a way that may be a little bit new and a little bit surprising for some folks.
Well, Chef, thank you very much. Stefan also said his presentation on doing stew or ragu sous vide is it's at 11:55 Central, and he does it the same way that you're talking about. I feel like you and Stefan should connect sometime. Stefan does a lot of really interesting Italian dishes, loves going to Italy, and knows a lot about Italian food and wine. I feel like the two of you could have fun geeking out about how you could use sous vide in fun Italian classic ways to kind of reinvent them.
Definitely. Actually, I'm very excited for that one.
Chef, I really appreciate you coming on, spending your valuable time and sharing. Every time you talk, I learn just so much more about sous vide. I really appreciate you coming on and just sharing your expertise with all of us.
All right. Well, thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Happy to be here again. Jason and Mike, thank you guys. We'll give you guys all a virtual hand here for everything you have done to put this together and create this community for us all to get together here and talk and share and learn from one another. So thank you.
We couldn't do it without speakers like you and Rich Rosendale doing yesterday, and all the amazing presenters we've had. It's just amazing, the knowledge and the time that you've all given to us. We really appreciate it.
And